What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. We are back, we're live, and I'm actually prepared with my water this week. We've got a whole lot of really cool stuff to talk about today. I've got my S5, I've got an S1R hooked up to my switcher because, as the title of this stream talks about, it's all about customization with our cameras. I've seen a lot of questions come up, and I've gotten a lot of questions both from, either on the Instagram page, since a lot of people have started jumping over there and asking us some questions in the direct messages. But then also around just general places on Facebook and some of the comments here about, how do you use the custom modes on our cameras? So C1, 2, 3, and so on. But then also, we've just recently published a new AF guidebook that we're going to, kind of take a look at and just kind of get you guys some information on. So I'll drop a whole bunch of links in the chat for that and all that kind of fun stuff. So there's a whole lot of cool stuff that I've got prepared. And as always, these are interactive streams. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I'm super excited to answer questions that people have. I'll do my best to get to as many of them as I can and answer as many of them as I can, so they don't have to be necessarily on the topic of customizing your camera or using the features that we talk about. But yeah, feel free to drop them in the chat. Just make sure you tag at LUMIX Cameras before your question. So type the @ symbol, start typing LUMIX, you'll see it autofill. This way it just pops up and I can differentiate it from the conversations going on in the chat normally. If this is your first LUMIX Live that you're joining, thanks for tuning in. We do these streams every single week on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and the whole purpose of them is to get a direct line of communication from you to the brand. I am one of the marketing team members here at Panasonic LUMIX. I've had many different jobs in this company, from business development to product management to social media management, and it allows you to have that, non-third party answer from a manufacturer. So instead of having to troll around online and try to find an answer, you can ask us. If it's something I can answer on the stream, I'm happy to answer it on the stream. Those that have joined us for these streams before know that, I might not be able to answer every single question. I might not have an answer for every single question, but I do my best to get an answer for you either the following week, or if you drop a question in the chat or the comments after the stream is posted live. All of the LUMIX Live broadcasts are archived on YouTube, so where you're watching it now, unless you're watching it in an embedded site somewhere. So you do have access to go back and watch all of our previous broadcasts that we've done. Like last week, we talked about, a lot of display technologies and stuff that came out at CES. So we tried that a little bit. A lot of people definitely did seem to like it. Some people definitely didn't like it. So we'll always look and see if there are different topics that people want to hear and that are maybe relevant to the imaging industry. So if you have suggestions for future streams that you want to see us cover, drop those down in the chat, or you can always email us over at lumixlive@us.panasonic.com. That goes to an inbox that I have access to, and I can be able to actually create more content for everybody. See here. I dropped a poll in the chat, just kind of a loose poll to see, what's your preferred video editing software of choice. I threw up there Final Cut, Resolve, Premiere, and then other, because I know that there's a couple others out there. Let me know. It's always interesting to see how many people are using, different types of software. Right now, Premiere is really heavily leading that pack. So it's interesting to see what y'all are using for editing software versus what we may see online as what appears to be the most popular. I want to make sure that I call out this week at the beginning of the stream, because I forgot to do it last week. LUMIX Pro Services. LUMIX Pro Services here in the United States has two tiers available. We have the red and the platinum tier. If you own a LUMIX camera, make sure to get yourself registered for at least the red tier. It is free. You don't have to pay for it. But it gets you into the platform so that if you do have a situation where you need to send your camera in for service, you're already one step ahead, you're prepped, you have the portal to go to for servicing, stuff like that. That gets you your extended 3-year manufacturer warranty here in the United States. So that's on top of the 1 year that you get from the manufacturer normally here. And you get some other access for, actually being able to manage a service if you happen to need it. Then we have the Platinum tier service. Platinum tier service it's our paid level tier. There are a little bit more requirements for actually getting into that platform depending on what equipment you have. But the Platinum Series service gets you a number of added benefits over the red tier. You still get that 3-year extended warranty, so that's kind of standard with all these. You get an exclusive member hotline direct into our team, so if you happen to prefer talking to a person or you need to talk to a person, you have access to actually calling in. So that's a perk of the Platinum Series. You get 2 business day turnaround on any kind of service that you send in with free next day shipping both ways. 20% off out of warranty repairs. So if you drop it or if you break it or something happens that's outside of a warranty repair, you get 20% off of those. You also get free sensor, EVF, lens calibration, and firmware updates throughout the year. So if you want to keep your equipment in the kind of top shape that it can, you're set with that. You also get a really cool welcome kit. We've talked about it a number of times on these streams. You get a really nice upgraded strap that is much better than the one that comes in the box with the cameras. Yeah, you get all of that for $199. Sometimes we do some promotions on it where you get it a little bit cheaper. So yeah, you get some cool access there. If you're not here in the United States, if you're watching from overseas, we do also have LUMIX Pro Services overseas as well, in different regions. The link I just dropped down in the chat provides kind of the global portal to the different countries that have it available as of right now. That list is always growing. The countries that are a part of LUMIX Pro Services is always expanding. So if you don't see your country there yet, reach out to your local Panasonic region and let them know that it's something you're interested in. And that's how that whole system grows. So yes, let us see here. Let me take a look at some of the chat questions that have dropped in here. And then we'll kick this off by looking at my S5 and my S1R, as I forgot to turn my lights on. There they go. All right. Let's see here. Kyle, thanks for doing these episodes. I had a question about LPS. 90% of my equipment says submitted for registration but doesn't change. Trying to upgrade with the GH5 Mark II pre-order. Thanks. There should be an email directly for LUMIX Pro Services that you can reach directly to them to see if there is if there's anything kind of waiting. One of the things that I have noticed is that every once in a while, when you get an email from LPS or from LUMIX Pro Services, it could be getting caught in a spam folder if it's not someone that you've ever gotten an email from. So definitely check with that. Otherwise, on the registration email, like the confirmation or in the portal, there should be an email address you can contact with directly. I will mention to the team on my side that, hey, some people are still pending the actual kind of registration and the paperwork to go through. Like everywhere in the world, bear with everything, because a lot of stuff is typically taking a little bit longer than normal. We're in a kind of interesting world where everyone's got to work from home, and especially when you're working in a program like this, everything's got to be taken care of very securely. So sometimes it may just take a little bit longer. Let's see here. Cool answers about the different video editing software. Keith says, not customization related. That's cool. The Panasonic CXROP app supports multiple cameras simultaneously, including the S1H, if I'm not mistaken, but LUMIX Tether seems to not. I'd have to actually take a look at the CXROP or ROP apps for the Pro camcorder side. They are developed by two different teams. So LUMIX Tether app supports multiple cameras with the making sure you're on LUMIX Tether version 2.0 for the desktop. That's probably one of the first things you want to make sure you're doing is we did update and we consolidated all the LUMIX Tether apps. So there's not multicam, there's not streaming, and then there's not just the standard one. They're all combined into one version now. So make sure you're using LUMIX Tether version 2.0. If you go to the page, you'll see a new update for it. And that it broadened what the single app can do. So it's all into one version. That may help with what you're looking at. I know with that version, I can link my BGH1, my BS1H, and my GH5 Mark II all together when I have them running off Ethernet. I honestly haven't tested running USB and Ethernet. It's just not something that I normally have done, but I can take a look at it and see if that's something I can figure out for you there, Keith. Let's see here. Continuing, I know Panasonic released an SDK for supported cameras. Do you know if anybody released paid apps supporting multiple LUMIX cameras? I don't know if anybody has released paid apps on their own using the SDK, but that SDK is public, so companies can make apps for it. You just have to look at the kind of who's out there. I know a lot of companies have been using it for integration. So how to control the cameras for different tools that are out there. So, yeah. Let's see here. I'm going to buy a new camera, and my two finalists are the GH5 Mark II and the S5. Which one do you think is better to buy and give me more years of usage in terms of technology and spec? That's a really, really hard question to answer. It's really going to come down to what your system goals are. You're looking at a full frame camera versus a crop censored camera. So the full frame camera, yes, you're going to get better low light. It's 24 megapixels. You've got the entire L-mount Alliance option of lenses and everything that can be adapted to it. So longevity-wise, I don't really think there's an issue between either of those two cameras. It's really just going to come down to which platform you really are going to kind of majorly focus on. If streaming and broadcasting is something that's maybe a little more important to you, the GH5 Mark II is probably the better choice right now because that has that ability to use a simple USB to LAN connector and run it and control it with LUMIX Tether for multicam, or LUMIX Tether 2.0, to get myself out of the habit of saying multicam. LUMIX Tether 2.0 so that you can, multicam control and, RTSP video feed, stuff like that. The S5 doesn't have that functionality, and to my knowledge, I don't think it's going to be able to get that functionality. I think there is a hardware change that has to be made to have that functionality. So yeah, that's kind of where it would sit. Personally, I obviously, because I work for the company, I have access to all the cameras. I use them all. I jump back and forth between my S5, my custom S1R, and my GH5 Mark II all the time, because I find certain circumstances may be better for one over the other. But that's the nice thing. It's the same menu system between the two cameras, so if you get comfortable using one, you can easily jump to the other. Long-winded answer for, unfortunately, just saying it's going to depend on what you need out of a camera. Let's see here. Do you think it might be possible for LUMIX to give non-flagship cameras flagship features for a cost? Example, focus transition for the S5 for $99. I think it might be quite popular. So stuff like that's not as easy as it necessarily sounds. Cameras have to be from day one designed to handle features and have a balance between what they are capable of doing and what that category or that style of camera should do. So cameras like the G9, this is probably the best example in the lineup that we have. The G9 originally launched, it was a photo-focused camera, just like the S1R. They're cameras that if you had no interest in video, you had some features, and it was good enough for 99% of people out there, 99% of things that you would ever want to shoot with it. However, over time, we learned that that camera was able to add some of these extra features to it. Higher bit rates. We were able to do 10-bit. You're able to do things like vlog, stuff like that. And in a camera like that, vlog is a paid upgrade for the G9. As far as whether or not something like that is popular, I will leave that one to just stay unanswered. Well, no, I'll comment on it. Paid updates in a consumer-spaced camera can be a very, very good thing. It's just going to depend. Depends on what that feature adds. And, I mean, as it sits now, you'll see that cameras like the S5 have things like Vlog pre-installed in it. The GH5 Mark II has Vlog pre-installed, or Vlog L pre-installed in it. I think a lot of it just is depending on the era of a camera when it came out, what its hardware capabilities are, and whether or not that camera can do the things that everybody wants it to do. No one camera is going to fit every single person's needs. That's why, it's the same thing. Like I often like to correlate, the camera, the physical hardware, the cameras that we use to things like painters. One brush isn't going to do everything for you. One camera's not going to do everything for you as I punch my microphone. Up until recently, up until the box cameras came out, I used a mirrorless, I think I was using between a GH5 Mark II, GH5S. I used the S series cameras for a long time for this. But then when the box camera came out, that's the correct camera to be using for this because it fits 99% of every piece that I would need to be able to control this camera, power it off one cable, and do it that way. So that means I don't have to use that equipment. But that means that I have multiple cameras. I know that that's not financially feasible for everybody, but it's just kind of the thing that I've said a lot over the streams and over the years is that I am a huge proponent of buy the correct equipment. Older cameras getting new technology flagship features, it does happen, but it's not something I would ever bank on because they're not designed for the things that we don't know at that time. Very long-winded answer for that one. So, sorry, everybody. Let's see here. Do you have any GH6 updates? I don't, other than if you just checked last week, I spoke about the GH6 in last week's stream. The GH6 is coming. Like I said, I am very excited about it. Like I've said last week, I have had hands-on with it. I am really excited about it. You can take that for what it's worth. As a photographer and a videographer, I am very excited about this camera, and I can't wait for everybody to get their hands on it. You'll know more before spring. That's about all I can tell you. Let's see here. Do you think it... Okay, that was a repeat of that last question. And Keith says, thanks for info about Tether 2.0. Yeah, Tether 2.0 might fix the issue you're having, Keith. Let's see here. Will you ever add focus transition to the G9? It would really go over well like 4K live crop. That goes back to the question before about features added into cameras. Truth is, the G9 is not... Yes, it can do a whole bunch of video, and yes, it can do really good video, but it's not designed with video first and foremost. So features like live crop and... the things like focus transition, that's what the GH series are for. If those are features that you need, the GH series is where you want to go. Even in the S series, you look at the S1H and all of the added benefits that camera has over a camera like an S1 or an S5. Yes, image quality-wise, you can get pretty similar to an S1H or a GH5 or 5 Mark II or a GH5S. But the truth is that, cameras are designed for purposes. Not one camera is going to have everything. So, unfortunately, you probably won't see things like focus transition or live crop in cameras like the G9, because it's just not what they're designed for. It's a different segment. If you need those things, that's what the GH and S1H series are for. Let's see here. Also, 10-bit 422 1080 and 24p. You can do it in 4K, but not in 1080. Yeah, so I do know on the S1, there's no 1080 24p in MOV. There is a AVC HD, but again, certain stuff like that, at some point, the basics start to change, and 4K 24p 10-bit. If you're really looking for 10-bit and you need that, shoot it in 10-bit. The file sizes aren't going to be that big of a difference between the two. Yes, you got a 4K file versus 1080p file, but you can easily take that 4K file and output it as 1080. Plus, it's better for future use of your video as a product that you're selling someone. Let's see here. GH5 Mark II versus S5 question. I'd suggest... Todd. Hey, Todd, how are you? Everybody, Todd's one of our ambassadors. He's a wealth of knowledge if you're looking at comparing between the two cameras. But yeah. And then Skepsis says, auto white balance lock on a G9 and silent shutter when taking the white balance photo. I did see that comment. I think it was on last week's video. We can definitely ask about stuff like that. I don't know if things like that will come, though. So, let's see here. I'll read 2 more questions, and then I'm going to jump into showing the customization stuff here. Any new S Pro lenses in the pipeline, like a 2.8 wide, super tele, or fast wide prime? So, we do have... Let me see if I can find it quickly here. LUMIX S series. On our global page that has things like firmware updates and stuff like that, if you take a look at the lenses, what's out there? We have, let me see what we have. As of right now, when you look at S series, now I don't know if this is S Pro or if this is just regular S. I'm just reading what the site says. Sales scheduled for 2020 or later. A large aperture, wide-angle zoom. That's what we do know is coming. I just don't have any more details on it for you. So, let's see here. And as far as ultra telephotos or super telephotos, things like that, we have the 70-300. I think is the longest in the LUMIX lenses. There are longer lenses from Sigma in the DG-DN series. And yeah, so there are super telephoto lenses, just you don't... It's the nice thing with the L-Mount Alliance. You don't have to necessarily look at just us. You can also look at Leica and Sigma and find those different areas. And then as far as fast primes, we did announce that we will have an 18mm f1.8 coming out as well. But that's all the information I have on that lens at this time. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So, like the title said for this particular stream, we wanted to talk about how you actually utilize the C1, C2, C3 modes on the camera. One of the most common things that I see online and that I get questions about with this is, how do I actually set them up? Because every time I go in here, I do my settings, I do a shoot, I turn the camera off, turn it back on, and everything's reset. What am I doing wrong? And this is it's a common question. It's been a common question for a very long time because of the fundamental way that we have programmed how you set up C1, C2, or any of the mode dial custom settings on the camera. And I have my S5 and my S1R set up here so that I can cut to them and actually show you in the menus how you do this. And I have these particular 2 cameras because there are a lot of differences between, depending on which camera you're on. The S1R is going to represent probably more of the common way that a lot of the cameras do. The S5 is the newer way because it offers a lot more flexibility in what you can do. So to start with, we're going to jump over and take a look at my S1R. So right here, as you can see, I've got my S1R set up. And on the top dial, if I switch this from video to C1, and it's going to cycle for a second because it has to go into a photo mode here, you'll see that it's just a default mode. It's going to be in program exposure, and everything's kind of just like, nah, it's okay. This is where a lot of people first make the mistake with setting up the C1 through C4, whatever your camera has. If you want to set your camera up so that you can go to this mode and have it recall the settings that you set up, don't go into that mode on the dial and start setting your camera up. What you want to do is go into the mode that you want to have assigned to that particular setting, right? So, in this case, you'll see that I am in creative movie mode and I'm in manual exposure. So say I want to have, in this case, 4K 60p, it's linear PCM because it's the S1R. My ISO, aperture, the fact that I use shutter angle instead of shutter speeds, my color profile, the peaking settings, stuff like that. Say this is how I want to have C1 set up. So all I'm going to do here is just click the menu button, and then I'm going to go to the wrench, and then go down to the cog, and you'll see where it'll say save to custom mode, load custom mode settings, and save and reset, all that kind of stuff. So from here, I'll go down this list actually from the bottom. So reset, that's camera reset. We're going to ignore that one. Save, restore camera settings, not relevant to this. This is so you can copy camera settings from one of the same model to the other model. But here, custom mode settings. So when I click in here, you'll see that I can choose a ton of different custom setting modes. And I'll show you how to get into those after this. By default, it's set to 3. 3 is the number thou shalt count. Anyone that's Monty Python fans. So it's going to go to 3. Titles, I can come in and I can retitle each of these. So if I want to say custom mode 1, I want to make it, so that I know which mode this is. Say this is 60p, so I'll come in and change this to 60p. So this will be 4K, put an underscore or a space in this case, 60p. Now when I save this, it says, okay, changing title of the custom mode as below. It means C1 is now going to be my 4K 60p. So I'm going to save this. So now what I can do is from here, you can go down and say, how does it reload custom modes? When it's changing the record mode, when it returns from sleep, or when you turn the power off. Each of these, and this is where you want to go to the user's manual for your camera, and it'll give you an actual readout of what each of these mean and how it works. By default, you'll see that it's when changing the record mode is when it reloads those settings on. Next up, we're going to go load custom mode means that I can just go in here and select and say, hey, I want to just manually go in and just load this mode into my camera. This means that I don't have to go to the mode dial position on. I can just click on this and say, load this, and it loads it to the current camera settings. But I want to save this to the C1 dial. So now I want to do save to custom mode. I want to save this to 4K 60p, that C1 dial, which will be the actual mode dial on the camera. And then I'm going to click yes. It's going to tell me complete. And now what it means is that, so right now, you'll see if I bring my info display up. Actually, I'll use this menu. It's a little bit easier to see. So you'll see right now that I've got creative movie mode is the mode that I'm in. 180-degree shutter. I've got f4 and all the normal stuff that you'd expect that I just set up as the camera. Now, if I go to C1 and change my display back, you'll see now in the top left, it says C1, creative movie mode, manual exposure, 180-degree, f4, and I'm shooting in 4K 60p. So when I go out of this screen, you'll see right there in the top, it's identical to what I just had the camera set to. This means that I can then go to C2, and we're going to get that black screen again because it's going to switch out of video to photo mode. C2 is a photo mode. So if I want to be able to go in and say, I want C2 to be 24 frame per second filming, I will then just go menu. Actually, in this case, I'll do this a little bit different. I'll click menu. I'll go into my settings here. Actually, let me go into creative movie mode so that we're in the actual mode I want to set this up to. I'll go here and say I want to set this to 4K 24p. It's going to change the output since I've got it attached to HDMI. And then say I also want this one to change my luminance levels. I want this one to be 0 to 255. I want to have, let's see here. I want to change this to seconds in ISO. And we'll adjust this real quick here. So I got to change this down to 50 since it's the closest. So say that's good. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to change the color profile. And we'll change the color profile to standard. So not really great. Not something that you're really going to use this for normally, but just as a demonstration. So then from here, do the same thing I did before. Click menu. I'm going to go to the wrench, the cog menu. Here, I want to go to custom mode settings. And I want to edit titles, and I want to change my C2 mode to something that makes it easy for me to recognize. So 24p. And then I'll change this and make sure that I know that this is standard. Save this, go back one more time, save to custom mode, save it to 24p standard. So now that is saved into the camera's memory. So I can do anything I want on this camera right now and change my modes to say, let's go in here, let's change this to 4K 30p. Actually, let's do something more drastic. Let's change this to 1080 60p. So we're at 1080 60p. You can see it in the top up there in the spot all the way on that, equivalent to this spot on the camera. So I'm in 1080 60 frames per second. From here, all I'd have to do if I want to recall that 60p is just turn the dial to C1. And then when I go display, see I'm at 4K 60p in the 709 color space with my 180 degree shutter angle. If I go to C2, you'll see it's going to cycle the camera again because it has to change that mode. There we go, 4K 24p. It's in Vivid because I guess I selected Vivid, not standard. And it's back into the shutter speed instead of shutter angle and ISO. The one thing that you would want to kind of be aware of while you're doing this is that certain things won't stay in the C1, C2, C3, and so on. Things like white balance. White balance, you're typically going to end up having to change white balance in different scenarios. The way you kind of get around this is where you use the auto white balance custom. So this is where if I click on my white balance button, you'll see that I have 4 custom white balance settings. And because this is my infrared camera, that's why I have some wild custom white balances here. So for something like this, I would set, custom white balance 1 correlates to C1. Custom white balance 2 correlates to C2, and so on and so forth. That's one of the ways that I know you can relatively quickly go through, get your camera set up to be custom, and everything's just going to be, kind of straightforward, and you're good to go there. Let me see here. I saw a couple more questions come in while we were going over that. Let's see here. When can we adjust white balance without using... See, I've seen a lot of questions about this coming in, about wanting to be able to do it without using a mechanical shutter. And I'm going to check something real quick here, because I think if I go white balance, go into here. Okay, so anyone that's having an issue setting white balance, sound off in the chat which camera are you using, because there's a couple things that can make this actually easy, at least for the time being, while this gets brought to engineers, things like that. And make sure I'm addressing your question correctly. When can we adjust white balance without using mechanical shutter and see color temperature data afterwards? It's written. So color temperature after it's written, in a still shooting scenario, you get that in the photo raw files. When you bring it into something like Lightroom or Photoshop or any kind of raw decoding software, you'll see that data there. Though I do want to just double check something here, because I don't know if people stopped messaging, but I don't see the chat running, and YouTube was acting up earlier today. So give me 2 seconds here. Okay, we've got that. Okay. All right, cool. So where was I? Yes, with the being able to do white balance. So one of the things that you can do if you're using an S1, S1R, or an S1H, well, actually an S1 or an S1R, and in the G9. The G9 has this functionality as well. The bottom of the camera, or the bottom left-hand side of the camera, if you're looking from behind, has the lever, a function lever switch. So on that function lever switch, by default, it's programmed to put the camera into silent mode, and to use silent shutter, things like that. The action of collecting white balance is going to be bound to what your shutter mechanism is designed for. So if you're primarily someone shooting with video and you never really use the camera for stills, you can go into the menu, and under the stills option here, you can go to shutter type and you can change it to electronic. What that will do for you now is, and I'll see if my microphone will pick this up. I think it will. I can click my white balance. I can go in here, select a point. Now, because I'm using an electronic shutter, when I click white balance, it doesn't trigger the mechanical shutter. It's using the electronic shutter for it. The other way you do this with the G9, if you don't want to change the shutter type to permanently be electronic, is that front dial, you can flip the switch, and on my S1R, you can now see in the top left that I have the box with the microphone and a cross through it. That's indicating that the camera is in silent mode. So when you have that, it'll do the same thing. So if I go in here, and you'll see shutter type is set to electronic. So if I change this back to normal mode, or at least my normal shooting mode. So if I go to auto, and then come in here, change this to silent mode, you'll see that it goes to electronic shutter now. And when I do the same thing, if I do my white balance select, it's done with the electronic shutter. So maybe not 100% the full fix that you're looking for, but that's one way that you can do it. Do your white balance without having to trigger the mechanical shutter to hear a noise. If you're in an S1 or an S1R, it already has, or even an S1H, it already has a very quiet shutter. The S5, G9, they do have a little bit louder of a shutter. They're relatively quiet in the grand scheme of how loud shutters have been in cameras. So that's something that hopefully provides a little bit of a stopgap while I bring it up to our team. Let's see here. Cookswell, is there anything we can do to make your love of the FZ? I'm guessing it's supposed to be 2500 and 300, but you've gone through 4 of them. How are you going? Oh, okay, I think you've put the question up in the start of the chat here. Was it with some dust on Safari in Kenya? So, uh, probably depending on the kind of dust. So cameras that are weather resistant, are only weather resistant. They're not weatherproof. And if you look at the different standards that are out there, the IP and the IPX ratings, most cameras in the market are never IPX rated. You're seeing a couple of them come up more recently. And that can work, but depending, you kind of have to read into what the IPX ratings are and what they mean for dust and stuff like that. Like, so I have the Z Flip, and obviously this isn't camera technology, it's a phone. This is the one that has, so it's a folding mobile device. They have an IPX rating on this, but it's only down to a certain size of dust. Cameras are going to be kind of the similar thing. So you kind of have some things that we have to do as photographers to protect our gear, or as videographers to protect our gear, because no matter what, there's going to be a real world scenario that kind of goes above and beyond what a lab test is going to tell you. So my best advice, if you're running into situations where you get dust in a camera, two things. One, not necessarily, don't use the camera, because that doesn't make sense and that's not logical. But try to find the situations in your shooting where you're noticing that you're going into a situation where there's a lot more dust. How fine is that dust? If it's ultra fine sand, maybe look at getting like one of those flexible, kind of bag style underwater housings for cameras that basically latches on to the lens mount, or the filter ring mount, and then lets you basically encase the camera in something like that. It's a similar kind of concept that we would use rain sleeves on cameras. Even if it's a fully weather resistant camera and it's a ruggedly built camera, I would still use one if I know I'm going into an environment like that. Even one of those things, even the rain sleeves, can be a big difference. When you do something like that, also make sure you use something like a really good UV filter or a clear glass protection filter. Don't buy cheap. Cheap filters are what impact image quality. Good filters are what can give you some, actual protection on the front side of the lens. Any kind of super zoom camera, because they have a lens barrel that goes in and out of the camera, there is protection inside of that. But if the dust is way too fine, or it's finer than it was designed for, dust can still encroach into those areas. So using something like the cheap little $3, $4, $5 rain bags, I think back when I was in photo retail, we used to sell a ton of them, and I cannot remember the name of them. Cheap little bags that just have drawstring on the front. Do one of those, and that at least protects those areas of it. But that's an extenuating circumstance. 9 out of 10 people are not probably going to ever run into a similar problem in that case. It's just that location that you're in. So, let's see here. Basil, are colors in the G100, EVF, and the touchscreen the same? I picked one up for Christmas, and the EVF is cooler than the touchscreen. Could it be my screen protector throwing off the color a bit, I suppose? So, with the G100, you're using two different display technologies. The viewfinder uses, I believe, what's called an LCOS display, where the rear screen is, I think, on that camera, I think it's using an LCD. Inherently, they're going to have slightly different color temperatures. The benefit of using something like an LCOS display that's in a G100 is that they're actually more color accurate. The downside is that some users, though it's not as big of a deal anymore because the cycle rate's gotten a lot faster in the panel that we use on the G100, some people can see color tearing. It just kind of depends on what your eyesight sees and how your eye responds to the different types of color reproduction or how the display shows you color. Between the two of them, it's one of the reasons why, if I go in here, it's one of the reasons why in our cameras, and see if I can remember where this is. I think it is, yes. In the settings menu, you have the ability to go in and do monitor settings, and then you can change things like brightness, contrast, saturation, and tint. What this can help you do, and because I'm looking at the rear screen, that's why it's showing me the monitor. What you would do is put the camera to your eye, scroll through the menu, go to that menu, what was it called again? Monitor settings. It'll actually change to, well, let me see if I can get it to do it here. I might be able to. Let me do this. Yes, here we go. So I just switched it and forced it into the viewfinder. So now you'll see it says viewfinder. So when I click on this, now it's going to adjust how the viewfinder looks. When I change out to the rear screen, then it changes to monitor. That's how you can kind of tweak. If you notice that the viewfinder's cooler, but you like the monitor better for the preview, or you find that it's closer to what you're actually looking at, you can go in and warm it up a little bit. It won't be 100% precise, as if like you took a colorimeter to it and actually color calibrated it, but you can get them to match doing it that way, either warming up the monitor or warming up the viewfinder. So hopefully that helps. It's a little bit lesser known thing that we have in the camera because it's not something that like stands out in your face as, hey, you've got this ability here. Let's see here. Is there, from FC, how are you, FC? Is there autosave options for custom settings? I.e., if I'm using C1 setting and I decide to change aperture, then shut the camera off, will the aperture be saved when I turn it back on? No. So that is one of the things, like we were talking about with C1. C1, C2, and C3 are designed as baselines. So when you go to C1 and you do, like, say you have to change your aperture or your shutter speed, it uses what the base was there. Aperture might not be a good representation for that, because let me see here. So if I go to C1 that I had set up, I'll do this on camera so you guys can see it. So I'm in C1 right now. I've got my 16 to 35 f4. So if I go in and I change this to, say, 358 degrees, and I change my, so that's focus, I change this to f5.6. So right now, I've changed the settings on here. If I turn my camera off and then turn it back on, those settings are persistent. So at least those two settings are persistent. If I leave C1, go into full manual, change this back because I keep shifting this, and go back into C1, the aperture is consistent, the shutter speed changed. So certain things are consistent, certain things aren't. That's one of the reasons why using C1 or any of those custom modes with things like aperture, shutter angle can probably be a better thing to do because it's 180 degrees, you know what you're there. But yeah, so let's see here. Let's see here. Neo, why isn't there an auto white balance lock, and will it be added? I've seen your question numerous times. I don't know why there isn't an auto white balance lock, and I have no information as to whether it's going to be added, can be added, or will be added. But I will bring it up to our engineers. Let's see here. Ulrich, the load custom profiles isn't available on the GH5. Is it available on a GH5 Mark II? Luckily, I have a GH5 Mark II right here. So if I go into my camera And yes, hey, my battery's actually charged. Let's go to settings. We'll go to... Yes, so on the GH5 Mark II, that is available. So that... My exposure's a little tough here because it's right by the light. But yes, that load custom mode is available on GH5 Mark II. So one more improvement that came with the GH5 Mark II. Let's see here. Patrick picked up a GH5 Mark II right before Christmas, and the IP streaming rocks your socks off. That is awesome to hear. I love hearing people actually using some of these features. When will the G9 get the video CAF sensitivity and speed settings activated inside the firmware? It's probably just a one instead of a... So, Hap, I'm gonna say the same thing that I said to everybody else. None of us are software engineers. We don't know how easy it is to do some of this stuff and the impacts that it may have on other aspects of the software, the firmware, and the cameras. Truthfully, it's something I can bring up to our team. That's about as much as I have on that particular comment. But that's a perfect thing to segue here for the last 10 minutes that we got on the stream today, is that, let me drop this into the chat, is that recently we just released a new update to the AF Guidebook. So the AF Guidebook, we've got a couple of them available, and I'll drop the kind of main link to just the main page with all of the guidebooks. Let's see here. Let me actually title this AF Guidebook page. So we have a number of these guidebooks available on the Panasonic global site. And each of these are designed to give you some different kind of guidance, hence guidebook, on how to use the autofocus system with our cameras. So in this case here, this is the newest version that was just updated. And this is for, you'll see the cameras that it is relevant to. So cameras from the S1H down to a G9. And this is the Video AF Guidebook. So the basic ones that we've had out for a long time now are more photo-oriented. These ones, this one in particular, which I'm really excited was finalized, goes through all of the different settings of giving you links to different videos to actually show you how these things work. So if you're someone who likes to have a visual representation of the, how to actually change these modes, you've got it. If you're someone who's streaming with your cameras, like a lot of us have been doing, and you want your autofocus to run when the camera's in standby, we explain the difference between mode 1 and mode 2, and then having it off. This is the continuous AF option in the menus, all the way down into what the different modes are, what the different options available, and then down into the custom settings for speed, sensitivity. And again, it says here what the different options available are. The focus assist functionalities, and then even further down, something that I was really excited to see get put into this, because I've had to explain it a lot to people. How the joystick works, what the different options are, and the difference between the 8-way joystick on cameras like the S series versus the 4-way joystick like the cameras on the G series cameras. But then even, if you want to change subjects, if you want to change which eye the focusing system's on, how to do that, the different touch controls that you have, how to actually do the different menu options and where they are in the camera. So you get a whole lot of kind of access into how to actually set these things up, how to customize it for your shooting scenario. And then even some of the more limited features for cameras that have the functionality here, like the focus ring control, LUMIX Tether for multicam, which we do actually have to update this again because this was created before. We switched everything into LUMIX Tether 2.0 that just kind of is the overarching. And then there's an explanation about the technologies for those that actually want to read about what the technologies are. And then just some other links for compatible lenses and everything that kind of works there. So that link is in the chat. If you're someone who's wanted to, kind of really deep dive into what the focusing system is, how it works, how you can customize it to your shooting style, take a look at it. Both the links are in the chat. The first link is for the Video AF Guidebook, and then the second link is just kind of the general AF Guidebooks, or the link to all of them. Let's see here. Other questions that came up here. On some, this question came from John. On some cameras, when you run the sensor cleaning, it cleans the sensor by vibration. When it locks the sensor, then it locks the sensor with magnets and powers down the sensor so you can swab it. Does the S5 do this? The S5 does not have a kind of sensor lock position for doing cleaning like that. Officially, if you want to clean your sensor, bring it to a professional who knows how to do this, who can actually set them up, and you're protected in a case like that as long as you're doing it in a reputable place. It's one of the benefits of the LPS Platinum service here in the US is that you can send the cameras to us and we'll do the whole thing. As far as having Panasonic do it, we have one facility in the country here in the United States. It's down in Florida. That is our service center. So if you want to have your camera sent in for service or repair, that's where it's got to go to make sure that you've got your warranted repair coverage. If you're going to try to do it on your own, people are free to do with their camera what they want if you want to try to clean it. Just know that if you damage something by trying to clean it yourself and you have to send it in for service, it's not covered under warranty for something like that. But I do clean my own sensors, but I also have worked with the guys that do clean the sensors and how they do it. So yeah, there's no kind of lock that puts the sensor in place for sensor cleaning. Typically, best recommendation, send it in, have it done professionally, and a little bit of a semantics, but you're actually cleaning the cover glass, you're not cleaning the sensor itself. Let's see here. Carl asks, or says... Yeah, okay, yeah, this is an ask. Custom modes, awesome. I can even mimic the not-so-bad photo-video S&Q dial of Model 4 to the dark side. Okay. Do you have some tricks up your sleeve with the custom modes for practical? I butchered your question. I apologize. Do I have any more tricks for custom modes? Truthfully, with the actual custom modes, so C1, C2, C3, they're not really tricks, but they're tips on it. Use them as, like I said before, use them as baselines for things like frame rates that you want to shoot at, stuff like that. If you're in some of the newer cameras, like if I go to my S5, the S5 has some added benefits that the other cameras don't. Actually, no, it's not my S5. It would be my S1H. The S1H has some added benefits, like being able to go in to do my menu for things like the recording options. What most of the cameras do all have in common is the ability to go here, go into your settings here. It's a little awkward on how I get to it. Where was it? I am blanking on where I'm trying to find this. Maybe I'll remember it in a few minutes. But let's see. Let's see what the other questions were here. Sebastian says, I've got one. I use saving camera settings to the SD card as a custom mode set, so saving multiple sets of settings. Not sure I'm following the comment, Sebastian. Saving the camera settings to the SD card as custom mode. Oh, okay. I think I'm following what you're saying now. So, yes, you could theoretically use, if I go to this view here, you could theoretically use, no, don't reset, save and restore camera settings as a kind of custom settings mode, because you can come in here and click load and then have them on a card and be able to actually then save infinitely more options than you would normally ever do. It's one of the things actually that if someone reaches out to me and, you know, they need some help troubleshooting an issue with the camera, I'll have people send me the DAT file of the camera settings to load onto one of my cameras. Because then it's as if I'm working with the camera right in front of you. I'm working with your camera. So yeah, that's actually one, you know, kind of little tip that you could use then as something that you can you know, kind of add an extra level of custom settings there. So, perfect. Yes. All right, cool. I did understand you. We kind of linked there for a second. All right. Let's see here. I think we got it for the questions. Let me end the poll here. And then, let's see. Any of the last questions before we go? We are going to wrap up. It is 2 o'clock here in Texas. So, oh, okay. Here we go. It's a really good one. I do that too. So you've got even more options than the 12 custom modes. Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can customize your cameras. You just have to remember that using the save restore camera settings is camera to camera. So it's, you wouldn't be able to program a GH5 Mark II, save settings out, load it on a G9, or vice versa. A G9 to a G9, GH5 Mark II to a Mark II, that kind of thing. Let's see here. Updated Lumix Tether 2.0 during this broadcast. Now it crashes on launch both my Mac computers. I have the required Mac OS. Restart the computer, no luck. Any tips? One thing that I would most likely say if you're running into it crashing on the computer, remove the multicam version. So go in, it's a Mac, so it is uninstalling. Remove the old version, remove the Tether 2.0 version that you just downloaded, and try a fresh install. With all of the OS updates, and this is true on Windows as well, with the switchover from 10 to 11, I did find that some legacy programs I had to reinstall because of something that changed in the OS. But I've checked Tether 2.0 on both Windows 11 and the newest iOS. And if you're using a M1 chip, it still should work perfectly fine. Rosetta 2 should be handling the conversion for it. But yeah, try. It sounds like such a cop-out response, but yeah, try uninstalling and reinstalling it. Sometimes I have found that for unknown reasons, software just sometimes doesn't like it. It's the same thing with like graphics cards. Even though you update them all the time, every once in a while, you get corruption in the files because they overwrite and they don't write every single thing new over and over again. Sometimes it just needs to be totally cleared out and then reinstalled fresh. Cool. So that looks like we're good on the chat. So, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in this week. Hopefully some of the tips and some of the directions that we gave on the custom function settings here helped some of you out. We will be setting up the chapters on this video. So usually within about an hour of the video being posted after the live stream, the chapters should be available. So I'll go in and make sure, like, you know, it's chaptered out so you know where to look if you want to get back to something that we talked about on this stream. Outside of that, we will be live again next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You're definitely not going to want to miss the next couple of streams that we've got coming. We just finalized the schedule for all of February. You're going to be seeing a decent amount of Matt Frazier. We'll have some ambassadors and some really cool topics to talk about. So make sure, if you don't already, to subscribe to the LUMIX Cameras channel. Once those videos go up, the streams go up for next week and then the rest of February. It's kind of, you know, a new year. I'm trying to get these scheduled out further in advance so you guys know what's coming. Get yourself subscribed, set reminders, make sure you're following us in the different social channels. Because that's where you're going to know when we're doing these things. And obviously, I know as everybody wants to hear more information about the GH6, getting subscribed to this channel, following us on platforms like Instagram, and getting registered for our emails or even on the LPS program is how you'll be the first to know when we do release the GH6. As I've said before, it is coming. I think everyone's going to be really excited about it. I know I am really excited about this camera. But yeah. Last reminder about LPS. LPS Red here in the United States is free. LPS Platinum is the paid tier for those that want that little bit of extra protection and want some of the extra frills that go along with an actual paid service program. Outside of that, I think I covered all the rest of it. Yeah, we'll be live again next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. By probably in the next day or so, I'll try to get all of the streams up scheduled so you'll be able to set reminders and do all that stuff. If you don't already, make sure to give us a follow over on Instagram. We are continuously posting information over there. If you're someone who likes to share content and you want to see your content featured on the LUMIX USA Instagram channel, make sure to tag us in it. We have some hashtags there if you want to follow us and you want to do that kind of fun stuff. Yeah. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I hope everyone's staying happy and healthy. And, yeah, we'll see everybody Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time next week. Take care.